this storm throughout the evening. But first, we have new information tonight on the White House's cover-up of the Benghazi terrorist attack. Fox News has now learned that 48 hours after that fatal assault, the National Counterterrorism Center and representatives from the FBI briefed members on Capitol Hill and told them there was evidence that al-Qaeda or an al-Qaeda-affiliated group was somehow involved. Well, now here's where things get sticky. According to sources, the very next day, CIA Director David Petraeus, during a Capitol Hill briefing, reportedly said the attack was spontaneous and equated it to a flash mob. So here's the question. Who in the Obama administration asked General Petraeus to go out and change the story? Well, my next guest is demanding, rightly so, to know the answer. His son, Ty Woods, is one of the 4 Americans killed in the Benghazi attack. His son is a Navy SEAL. Joining us is Charles Woods with his children, Jeremiah, Faith, and Hope. Thank you all for being here. I am so sorry your son turned out to be this is one of the most heroic stories I have ever heard in my life. He was told, he was a mile away at the CIA, a mile away from the consulate. He heard the cries for help, was told to stand down twice, and he went anyway.
You know, it does not surprise me at all that my son would disobey direct orders from the White House to stand down and not to help. He's trained as a Navy SEAL never to leave anybody behind. So it does not surprise me one bit that he would jeopardize his military career as well as his life to help save the lives of those 30 other Americans.
You shared with me an email you got from one of the people your son saved.
Okay, this was very touching. I received an email from someone who said, "Your son's sacrifice saved my life." And I was very much touched by that. And he touched many lives, he saved many lives, but he was a hero long before he went to Libya.
What is so frustrating to me is the president, 2 weeks after, is still saying that this is related to a movie trailer. It wasn't true. He's still saying it had to do with the movie trailer, spontaneous. This was a terror attack. He was asked 2 weeks later if it was a terror. He's still blaming the movie. Then we find out that the ambassador requested security. It was denied, and they reduced it. And then we find out that they knew from day one. They could see this in real time. What are we to think of? Why would the president not tell you and your family here and the country the truth?
Why wouldn't they tell me the truth? I don't know what their motivation is, but Hillary, a couple days later when the bodies were flown in, she had the nerve to lie to me. I knew she wasn't telling me the truth. She's smarter than I am. She had to know that the story that she gave me about the film was not the truth either.
And she said they were going to put them in jail, she told you, the filmmaker.
Well, someone should be put in jail as a result of this, or many people should, but I don't think it's a filmmaker we're talking about.
You blame the president. You blame the White House.
Well, let's just say, I don't want to point any fingers, but obviously people in the White House were watching this happen real time. Someone in the White House, or many people in the White House, watched the events unfolding and knew that if they gave the order to stand down, that my son would die. They watched my son die. As far as I'm concerned, there are people in the White House, whoever it was that was in that room watching that video of my son dying, their cries for help, their order, don't help them at all, let them die. Whoever that might be numerous people. You have the blood of my son. You have the blood of an American hero on your hands. I don't know who you are, but one of these days the truth will come out. I still forgive you, but you need to stand up.
While we're on this, I would like to say, I mean, while we're obviously very much connected with Ty, by no means is only him, but there are many other Americans there,
That's right.
including Ambassador Stevens and Glenn Doherty. So, just
Jeremiah, your dad was telling me something. You looked up to your brother.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously a good deal older than me, but growing up, he was definitely someone who I could idolize very much. He was an embodiment of a hero from day one. He'll obviously end up going down as being known for his last act of heroism, but it really started from an earlier age than when he was 41 and in Libya.
Let me ask all of you here. because you all have expressed a strong Christian faith. And can you forgive? I don't know if I would be able to. I was telling you this in the green room, and I'm not kidding. I would be so angry. We'll start with you girls. You're 12 and you're 15.
15, yeah.
It's a lot to ask, you know, when you lose somebody that close to you.
Well, I mean, like, God's in control of everything. We just have to trust him every day.
And you miss your brother.
We do. As a Christian, we should act how Jesus would want us to act. And obviously we need to, like Jesus, he was pretty good and forgiving, and
But you also want answers. You want to know the truth.
we do, yeah.
Yeah. And the main thing is he was told to stand up. Why would you say to stand down when he wanted to help and he had to risk his life? And why, if these cries were being heard not only by your son and by others that did risk their lives, why were they denied help? Because your son died 7 hours after he went in.
You know, I can't imagine anyone with any heart that would watch a battle rage for 7 hours, knowing that heroes were there that were going to be slaughtered if you didn't have help sent in. As we know, the C-130s could have been sent there in less than an hour. Jets could have been scrambled in minutes from many different parts of the globe. The order was, don't help them, let them die. You know, I'm sorry, the people in the military are honorable, and when they make a vow, they're honorable enough to live up to it. Part of that vow is to defend American lives on American soil from all enemies, foreign and domestic. This compound was American soil by international law. I'm speaking as an attorney. By international law, a diplomatic compound is American soil, no matter where it's located. So we had 30 American citizens on American soil. This is no different than if it happened in LA or any other city. It would not take 7 hours normally to scramble the jets to send the 130 if this was on American soil in California or New York or any other place. But I don't know why. Why didn't they do it?
I want the tapes released. The tapes that caused your son to defy orders to stand down. They have those tapes. They have drone tapes.
Okay.
They can release them.
Okay, we're not political. I did not vote for either candidate last time. To be political would
I'm not trying to be political.
Okay, but to be political would be dishonoring to my son's life and death. However, I'm here to honor my son. Part of the process of honoring is to forgive, but part of the other process is truth and to make sure that justice is pursued. I hope that it is, because justice has to be paid for the benefit of everyone.
Thank you for being here. You're
Thank
all in
you.
our thoughts and prayers.
You're a gentleman.
Thank you very much.
I would like to just share one thing.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by heroes. We have a hero right here. Before the show, Sean mentioned that he donates his time to go out and do concerts and raise money to give scholarships to children whose parents have died in action. I said, Ty Jr., Ty's son, just graduated from high school. He needs to go to college. This hero right here.
Oh, I don't want to talk
no,
about
just a second, just a second. Lifted up his phone and said one word, done. Jeremiah just called Ty Jr. and told him, guess what, you can go to college now. You got a scholarship. And Ty said, sorry. Ty Jr. said, sorry, you're a week too late. I just signed up for the Navy for 4 years. I am walking in my father's steps. Now, Ty, he had empty shoes that need to be filled. His son, Ty Jr., is filling those shoes. I want Ty to be a role model for others, that they will walk in his shoes, that other Americans will become American heroes too. Thank you.
Absolutely. There's one more thing I could add along with that. Before Ty left for his last tour, one of the last people to talk to him, he asked Ty about some, why are you going? I mean, Ty, he'd served 20 years as a SEAL. He had already been involved to the point where he had a pension, and he was financially doing well. He had a wife, a newborn child, and the man asked him, why are you going? You know, why are you doing something so risky right now with what you have? And what he said was, America needs peoples, and if people to serve, and if I don't go, who will? And I don't know, it's good to see the support for people who are filling those shoes, because they're definitely very big ones.
Your son and your family are in our prayers. Thank you
very
so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up, parts of Manhattan continue to be in darkness tonight. We'll have the very latest on the storm and
State Department documents released earlier this week show the White House knew that the Libya attack, that attack that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens, was terrorism just 2 hours after the attack. Now, according to the emails, the Islamic militant group Ansar al-Sharia claim responsibility for the attacks at the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. With me now, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge. Catherine, thank you so much for being here.
Nice to see you in person.
Catherine, these emails were sent to some very high people in the White House. Who got them, and how high up did these messages go?
I have some of the emails right here, and I think these are the single most important documents that we've seen in the Libya scandal, because this takes real-time information of how the attack unfolded to the National Security Council staff within the White House. So that's the White House Situation Room. Those are the top national security advisors for the president. And also, when you decode the email addresses, what you see here is that it went to the special assistant for Secretary of State Clinton, whose job it is, take an email like this and go, you need to pay attention to this. Also the number 2 and the number 3. So there's no way the administration can deny that they did not know what was happening in Benghazi.
These are not just sitting around in the inbox somewhere to be picked up over the weekend.
They're not. And the fact that these emails go inside to the heart of the White House Situation Room, means the president's top advisors knew it was unfolding as a terrorist attack, and that this group, Ansar al-Sharia, was claiming responsibility. And that is important 5-6 weeks later, because the only suspect we have in custody is part of this group that wants to establish an Islamic State in eastern Libya. So all of the intelligence has come full circle to what they knew on 9/11.
And Catherine, some of the news that you have broken is that there's really smoking gun evidence that the content of these emails indicate there's no way this could have been just some spontaneous mob.
Well, the emails show that they believed it was a terrorist attack from the outset, but separately there is physical evidence that was described to me as a smoking gun. There was mortar fire that was used specifically on the annex. This was the CIA outpost, part of the second wave of the attack. To use a mortar, you have to know distance, elevation, weather conditions, as well as the weight of the shell to do a mathematical calculation for the angle. This is not something that at 3 in the morning you rock up and decide to fire a mortar that's going to be a direct hit. This is something that has to be staged in advance, and I was told the plates that the mortar would have used to fire would have to be set during daylight hours, so at least a day in advance. Again, another piece of evidence that shows it was not pre-planned.
We now know that CIA operatives asked repeatedly, at least 3 times, to get some backups, get some help there. Never happened. Why not, and who denied it?
Well, the reporting from our Pentagon team is that some of the CIA operatives at the annex asked twice to go to the consulate to aid the ambassador and the others who were trapped there because they knew it was under fire. What we were told is that individuals on the ground denied that, told them to hold. Then there was a third request for backup for the annex when it came under attack. We're still waiting for a formal response from the CIA, but you have to ask the question, was there an effort, number one, to downplay the exposure of the size and the breadth of the CIA presence in eastern Libya? That, I think, is one of the great untold stories here.
I had a conversation earlier this week with Senator Lindsey Graham. He has repeatedly sent letters to General Petraeus at the CIA, to Defense Secretary Panetta. He's not so much as gotten a response. He's asking very pointed questions. Who knew about this situation? When did the president get notified? What did he do after he was notified? He has not been given an answer. Why is there a, and I'm going to use the term, I know you can't make editorial judgments, but I sure can. There was stonewalling. Stonewalling and Coverup.
Continues to be stonewalling.
And why? And what is it we're trying to protect here?
You're onto something extremely significant here. On September 14th, the CIA Director David Petraeus briefed members of Congress on the status of the investigation. And what I have heard through my reporting, without releasing classified information, is that those lawmakers were extremely angry and disappointed with the CIA Director because he was so wedded to the administration's narrative that it was this video and seemed to completely disregard the other reporting about the attack. Senator McCain told me that he is incredibly disappointed with the CIA Director, someone who for many years has been untouchable because of his military accomplishments. And there has not been a good explanation. I believe that much of this will come back to weapons and the movement of weapons out of Libya to Turkey and then into Syria, and what the United States knew about the movement of those weapons and whether it did anything to stop the movement of those weapons. I have one piece of data that says Ambassador Stevens was in Benghazi on 9/11 to negotiate a weapons transfer to get these SA-7s out of the hands of extremists. The State Department dismissed that idea. But to me, it makes sense why he would put himself in such a volatile area on the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks.
And he not only put himself in that position, but there was an attempt to try to keep his visit low-key so it would not be well known that he was in Benghazi, because likely there would have been more of a security presence there. Was there inside information that leaked that the ambassador was in Benghazi?
There are two data points I think we want to pay attention to here. Based on our ongoing reporting at Fox, we were able to show that on September 6th, a Libyan vessel arrived in Turkey with what was reported to be a large shipment of these shoulder-fired missiles. 5 days later, the U.S. ambassador is in Benghazi, and you know who he's meeting with? He's meeting with the Turkish diplomat in Benghazi. 5 days earlier, weapons had arrived. Why did they want to keep the visit low-key when they knew repeatedly from their people on the ground that security was the Achilles heel? I don't know. But I think this will unfold, and I think one of the issues that will come to the surface is going to be the movement of these weapons.
Catherine, let me just say, you have done some stellar reporting on this, and I appreciate your uncovering some extraordinary details.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's important for those 4 people who lost their lives that we honor them with the facts and the answers in this case.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Catherine Herridge, thank you. We're going to discuss the president's pattern of denial from Fort Hood to Little Rock to Benghazi when we return. Stay with us. Libya isn't the first time the Obama administration has failed to recognize an attack on Americans in the name of jihad as terrorism. This week, survivors of the Fort Hood shooting in 2009 that killed 14 and wounded 32 others, a shooting carried out by Major Nidal Hassan, those survivors released a video urging the government, which has labeled the attack as workplace violence. Well, they've said, call it what it really is.
That's not workplace violence. That's terrorism. And I pray every night that somebody will finally care enough to make it what it really is.
In June 2009, Abdul Hakim Mohammed, formerly known as Carlos Bledsoe, shot and killed Private Andy Long outside a Little Rock, Arkansas Army Recruitment Center. Now, here's how Mohammed, who was radicalized and trained in Yemen, justified the shooting.
I don't think it was murder, because murder is when a person kills another person without justified reason. And I felt what I did was Islamic justified, and also justifies, common sense,
And yet the administration still refuses to call it terrorism. The fathers of the shooter and the victim became friends after the murder trial. Now they're working together to try to keep other Americans from becoming radicalized. You saw them on this show last Father's Day. Joining me once again, Melvin Bledsoe and Darius Long, who have had their story chronicled in the powerful documentary, Losing Our Sons. Welcome to both of you. It's good to have you back, and thank you for being a part of this. In 2 cases now, both Fort Hood and in Little Rock, we've had an administration that refuses to say this is terrorism. Darius, what answers have you been given when you've tried to find out why your son's death was never labeled an act of terror?
We never really got any answers from the administration. What we got was from the press secretary. And what I can say is you get crickets, then you get the denial, then what you get is a spin, and then you get the just the obfuscation of the facts. Little Rock becomes drive-by shooting. Fort Hood becomes just workplace violence. Benghazi becomes this reaction to a spontaneous demonstration. To me, what it really shows is Little Rock might have been the exception had it been the only thing. Fort Hood became a trend, and Benghazi confirmed a pattern. I mean, in law enforcement, that's called a modus operandi. That's an MO.
You know, Melvin, your son, we played the audio. He clearly said that his actions, by his own admission, were an act of jihad. When you talk to FBI agents and others about your son's actions, why do they not call it terrorism?
Well, they don't want the American people to know exactly what happened. They also deny that my son was radicalized. He was radicalized by the evildoers, and he was brainwashed also by the same folks. He was programmed and trained to kill, and the FBI and the American government followed my son to Yemen, tracked him for over 2 years before Little Rock even took place.
Earlier this week, the father of former Navy SEAL Tyrone Woods, one of the 4 Americans killed in Benghazi, called in Lars Larson's radio show and described his personal experience after the body of his son and the other victims were returned home at Andrew Air Force Base.
This is what Hillary did. She came over and, you know, she did the same thing, you know, separately came over to and talked with me. I gave her a hug, shook her hand, and she did not appear to be one bit sincere at all. And, you know, she mentioned that thing about we're going to have that person arrested and prosecuted that did the video. That was the first time I'd even heard about anything like that. What's coming out right now, kind of the whole feeling that I got about this when it happened is we're not being told the truth. Something fishy is about what happened over there.
Darius, when you hear this dad talking about the situation, how does it make you feel?
These comments are just over the top. Here you've got 4 people dead in what is clearly an attack, and the Secretary of State is talking about arresting a guy exercising his freedom of speech rights in the United States. They're not talking about going after the killers. I mean, this goes to an agenda where it started with the Istanbul Accords, to where this government is actually speaking to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, talking about restricting offensive language to this group. I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled on that. Free speech is not only the stuff that we like to hear, but it also has to protect the stuff that we don't like to hear. I mean, you couldn't write a better script in Hollywood, but this isn't fiction, this is fact.
You know, Melvin, there were a lot of warning signs in Benghazi. They seem to be ignored. You have said that there were warning signs regarding your son. What were some of those warning signs, and what is it we're not yet learning about how to read them?
I've been trying to tell everyone who could listen for the last 3 years about what happened, and no one wanted to hear me. But I warned the American people that if we don't do something about it, it's going to continue to happen. And those warning signs is that the American government just not listening. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to call it what it is.
Darius, one of the frustrations I know that you've expressed is that your son has been denied the awarding of a Purple Heart posthumously because it was not considered part of his military service. I know that has been frustrating to you. You've continued to ask that his case be reopened. What do they tell you when you ask about the Purple Heart?
Well, they basically say that because it's just a criminal act and it wasn't tried as terrorism, then he's ineligible. And it's the fact of the matter is he was charged under Arkansas statutes. The federal government basically gave us the impression that there would be terrorism charges later on. That was not followed through. I mean, there are no statutes in Arkansas for terrorism. So here the federal government is blaming Arkansas for trying him as a criminal and saying, well, it's not a terrorist act. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. You mentioned the film that came out. That is actually streaming on demand from LosingOurSons.com and on Ustream at no charge right now. So people could go see it, and they can see exactly what transpired and where the institutions of government have failed us.
Well, I have seen the video. It is extraordinarily powerful, and I hope people will watch it. It will be a wake-up call. Coming up, my reaction to